His sister mocked me right there on the airbase tarmac, in front of everyone, pilots, officers, even visiting brass, loud enough for the wind to carry her words further than her dignity ever reached. "Oh," she said, her voice syrupy with arrogance, "I thought she was here to mop the floors." A ripple of laughter broke across the group. It wasn't just the younger cousins she charmed with her snide little joke. Derek's mother, all pearls and posture, even chuckled behind her champagne glass. Derek didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. Just stood there, rigid and quiet, the way men do when they're too spineless to make a scene but too weak to stand up for what matters. I smiled, thin and sharp as a blade, and sat down at the polished table, biting the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste iron. You learn to wear silence like armor in the military. But the worst kind of silence is the one that follows humiliation. The kind that forces you to sit among people who pretend they didn't just treat you like dirt under their designer shoes. What none of them knew, what Clara, her wine-sipping entourage, or even Derek himself didn't realize, was that I wasn't just there for lunch and insults. I was on call. A critical retrieval mission had just entered the danger window in the northern desert range, and I was the only person on base qualified to fly the Mark 54 stealth reconnaissance jet, a $300 million beast of cutting-edge engineering that had grounded every other pilot who tried to tame it. It was eye-assisted, vertical takeoff capable, and sensitive to the point where the wrong breath could throw it off course. Most couldn't even get it to lift off. But I'd logged more hours in that aircraft than any pilot on the continent. I'd lived in simulations, sweated through field tests, mastered its impossible quirks. And when the call came through, secure line, classified clearance, urgent tone, I didn't hesitate. I slipped away from the officers' club, out of my dress blues and into my flight gear, and headed straight for the flight deck. While they drank and whispered, I walked straight into history. The storm was closing in fast. A covert strike team had been compromised during a high-level mission. One of them was injured, pinned down, and time was bleeding out quicker than he was. The dust storm moving through the desert had swallowed visibility to less than 10 feet, wind slicing at over 130 knots. The only way in or out was vertical insertion, precision-timed. I climbed into the V4, buckled in, and let instinct take over. The jet screamed through the sky like a banshee on a mission. I wove through rock formations and smoke plumes in near-zero visibility, my hands flying over controls faster than thought. That's the thing they don't teach you in school, Ivy League or otherwise. You don't fly the V4. You become it. Every second in that cockpit was a conversation with danger, and I didn't stutter. When I reached the strike team's location, I landed the jet with surgical precision. Captain James Langston, their golden boy, poster child for military excellence, was already going pale from blood loss, his thigh soaked red. He saluted as I dragged him aboard. We lifted off just as the storm peaked. The return flight was a chaos of turbulence, and I had to execute a vertical emergency landing directly onto the base helipad. A maneuver so delicate, only 2 pilots in the country had ever pulled it off. I was one of them. By the time I stepped out of the cockpit, the base was alive with movement, medics, command, debrief officers. I didn't even get to shower. Straight into diagnostics, data review, aerial telemetry breakdowns. It was hours before I resurfaced, still caked in dust and sweat, adrenaline buzzing in my teeth. The awards luncheon had long since ended, but word had already spread like wildfire through the base. The mission, once deemed borderline impossible, had succeeded. 1 woman, 1 jet, 0 casualties, 1 rescued hero. My name was on every tongue. I hadn't done it for glory. I had done it because it was my job, because I could. But fate, it seemed, had a flair for timing. That evening, I was summoned back to the officers' club for a quiet commendation ceremony. I assumed it would be low-key, a pin, a handshake. Instead, when I walked in, the room was full. Clara, Derek, his whole family, still in their afternoon finery, seated stiffly like props at a table they no longer owned. Colonel Hastings stood at the podium. He didn't hold back. He described the mission, the threat, the storm, the tech, the fact that fewer than 5 pilots in the world could have done what I just did. And then, God bless him, He looked straight at Clara. "Let it be known," he said, clear as a bell, "that when others laugh, this woman flies." Silence fell like a hammer. The room, earlier filled with smirks and side eyes, was now hushed in awe. I stood, received my commendation, and nodded. No smugness, no gloating, just gravity. Clara couldn't even meet my gaze. Her wine glass trembled, and Derek, at long last, opened his mouth. "Natalie, I had no idea. I'm sorry." I looked at him, calm. "No," I said, "you didn't, but you do now." And then I left. The next morning, my phone buzzed with missed calls and guilt-soaked texts. Derek wanted to talk. He wanted to explain. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Curiosity's a cruel mistress. We met at a cafe outside the base perimeter. He looked tired, worn thin by shame and sleeplessness. I didn't care. He started talking the moment I sat. Apologies, regrets, the usual flurry of too late realizations. "I should have defended you," he said. I was caught off guard. I stirred my coffee and stared at him. "You let them laugh at me," I replied. "You chose silence over respect." He nodded, desperate. "I think I always knew you were incredible. But in that moment, I became their little brother again." And there it was. The truth, small and brittle. He hadn't stood up for me because he never stood for anything that might upset the balance of his family's approval. Love isn't enough when it comes without courage. I stood, calm and finished. "You didn't defend me because you didn't respect me enough to risk their disapproval. That tells me everything I need to know." And this time, he didn't follow. I didn't cry. Not when I got back to my Jeep. Not in my quarters, where a photo of us from last Christmas still sat, frozen smiles and fake harmony. Because I wasn't grieving a man. I was letting go of a lie. And it felt like freedom. That same week, I was offered a new assignment. Top secret aviation research on the West Coast. Think NASA level. I'd be training next-gen tactical pilots, helping design the next V-series aircraft. It was the kind of post that cracked open doors into aerospace circles few ever saw. I accepted immediately, but before I left, there was one last full-circle moment waiting for me. Clara again. She showed up on base. Her father had pulled strings to get her into a defense PR internship. She was touring the hangars with a few other interns, clipboard in hand, trying not to sweat through her silk blouse. She saw me, and I saw her. I was in full flight gear again, fresh from a simulation. I didn't avoid her. "Clara," I said smoothly, stopping in front of her. "Mop bucket still missing?" Her face flushed, lips parted, no words came. Not one. 10 seconds passed, still nothing. Just as I turned to go, she whispered, "I didn't know. I thought you were just a base tech." I stopped and turned, slow. "You thought I was nothing. And you made sure everyone knew it. Now you can't even say my name?" She looked down. I swear I heard her pride fracture. I stepped closer. "The thing is, Clara, I've always been exactly who I said I was. The only difference is now, you believe it." I walked away. No drama, no raised voice, just the weight of truth she couldn't carry. That night, I packed my things. No regrets, just uniforms, mission logs, and one photo. The V4 mid-storm, slicing through chaos. A reminder that I earned my place through grit, skill, and action, not approval. On my final morning, the base commander personally saw me off. Salutes, handshakes, respect earned, not given. As the chopper lifted, I looked down at the airfield one last time. The same place I was mocked and underestimated. The place I rewrote my story. No one was laughing now. They were standing at attention, watching me rise. They saw grease on my boots and thought I belonged with the janitors. They never imagined I'd be the one flying their most advanced jet through a sandstorm to save their hero. Now they knew. Now they saluted. As I soared into the sky, leaving that chapter behind, I carried nothing but truth. I never needed their approval. Just my wings. I didn't look back again. Not at the hangars. Not at the officers' club. Not at the runway where I had once paced out late-night mission drills under floodlights. Some places don't deserve a second glance. The hum of the chopper blades above me was steady, rhythmic, almost meditative, but my mind wasn't quiet. I thought of all the times I had been second-guessed, not because of my skill, but because of how I looked walking into the room. A young woman. Not tall, not loud, not trying to impress anyone. And somehow, that always seemed to rattle the ones whose accomplishments came with applause, not sweat. Clara had tried to reduce me to a punchline in a room full of egos, but the truth? I was the one holding the pen the whole time. She just never noticed until the ink spelled her irrelevance. And Derek, he wasn't cruel, just weak, and sometimes that's worse. His silence was a betrayal wrapped in polite manners and family obligations. But I didn't need bitterness to move forward. I needed distance, and I was finally getting it. When I landed on the West Coast, it wasn't just the air that felt different, it was the pace, the people, the energy. The new base was quieter, more technical, less full of pomp and more focused on precision. It was a research facility embedded within a restricted zone that only a handful of people in the country even knew existed. Here, rank still mattered, but results mattered more. And I had results. The V4 mission had earned me clearance into projects I once only read about in secure files behind triple authentication gates. I wasn't flying solo extractions anymore. I was working alongside aerospace engineers and defense analysts to develop the next generation of aircraft. Faster, more agile, more intelligent. These weren't machines anymore. They were extensions of the human mind, with neural interfaces and adaptive learning systems. I wasn't just part of the team. I was leading flight integration for the test models. For once, no one asked why I was in the room. They just handed me the schematics. But even in this new chapter, ghosts travel light. Some nights, I'd wake up at 3 a.m., adrenaline still spiking from dreams of mid-air turbulence or the sound of Clara's voice echoing in some warped memory. Other times, I'd think of Derek, not with pain, but with an odd gratitude. His silence had forced a truth I might have spent years ignoring. I could have been the decorated pilot standing beside a man too afraid to speak up for her. Instead, I was alone, yes, but free. Every morning I ran drills or reviewed flight logs. I felt it more clearly. I had cut the cord to a life that tried to tame me into something smaller, more palatable. I had refused to be polite at the cost of my own pride. That wasn't a loss. That was liberation. Months passed. I rose quickly. My name was now listed next to some of the top minds in the Department of Defense's Innovation Wing. There were conferences, classified briefings. A whisper of a NASA liaison position floated in conversations I was never meant to overhear. My work spoke louder than any family name, louder than any Ivy League degree. I found myself mentoring junior pilots, especially women, who came in wide-eyed and skeptical, carrying the same doubts I had once swallowed for years. To them, I wasn't just a superior officer, I was proof. Proof that you could be underestimated and still outrun everyone. Proof that you didn't need permission to be excellent. And that sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud, it's just living better, flying higher, and never circling back to the people who couldn't see you the first time. And then one day, about a year after I'd left Green Rock, I got a letter. Not a text, not an email, an actual letter, hand-addressed, no return name. I almost tossed it, but curiosity, that old cruel companion, tugged at me again. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper. Clara's handwriting, elegant, slanted, unmistakable. "You don't owe me anything," it began. "But I owe you the truth." She went on to say that she'd spent the past year grappling with what she saw that day, me in that flight suit, commanding a room that she thought belonged to people like her. She admitted she had judged me out of insecurity, not malice. That she had built her confidence on assumptions, and I had shattered them without even trying. And maybe the most surprising part, she thanked me. Not in a flowery way, but in a way that felt real. She said watching me walk out that night made her realize how much of her life was built on performance, not purpose. It was an apology, yes, but it was also a confession. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Some stories don't need sequels. They just need closure. And Clara's letter, folded quietly into a drawer I never opened again, was exactly that. Now, whenever I look out over the test runways stretching toward the Pacific, I remind myself of where I started. A base that tried to laugh me off the map. A man who couldn't find his voice when it mattered. A woman who needed to be the smartest in the room until she realized she wasn't. And me, always me. The pilot they never saw coming. The name they now cite in briefings. The one they salute, not because I asked for it, but because I earned it. And if there's one thing I've learned flying through storms and silence alike, it's this. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is let them laugh. Just make sure you're already in the cockpit when they realize who you really are. I never chased validation after that. I didn't need applause, likes, or approval from people who once dismissed me. What I had was something quieter, something stronger, integrity, purpose, and the knowledge that I never had to shrink to fit into someone else's comfort zone. I flew higher, not to escape them, but to become fully myself. Because at the end of the day, they remembered the joke. But they'll never forget the flight. And neither will I.